Oh, and I think we're live. Well, welcome everybody to the start of a new series that I'm running with our friends at Figures. This has been something that I've been really excited to do for a really long time because compensation is something that affects everybody. And compensation technology has been such a category that has been missing in our world for so long, and it's fantastic to finally see really new innovations that are going to help us get more equitable pay across the board. And we're going to run sort of a four-part series over the sort of the next couple of months. So make sure you keep an eye on what we're doing here. And it's all going to be about how we get better as employers in terms of our compensation strategy, and actually how we get better as individuals when we negotiate our compensation for ourselves. So really pleased to see everybody here. I just want to make sure from a sound check point of view, basic housekeeping. Can everyone hear me okay? I know there's a bunch of people watching this. It's quite a new platform for me. So if you can hear me all right, can you just quickly say yes in the chat here? On the bottom left or right of your screen, you should see a chat function and you should be able to say things there. So make sure that's happening. Are people saying yes? They can hear me? Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, whilst we're here, we might as well take a look at that little bar. You should also see a questions tab down at the bottom. The questions is where we want you to basically ask questions to the guests. Reason why we want you to locate the questions there, because there is an up vote, down vote feature there, so that we can escalate the questions that go to the top and make sure they get priority to be answered. Otherwise, continue to chat away in the chat. That's where we want to be as well. And there's also a poll and that I want everyone to check out as well. The poll is essentially our understanding, sort of our attempt to find out who the audience is today for this topic. And given the topic itself is about sort of gender equity and gender pay, it would be interesting to know whether there's a difference in terms of the audience that are coming in to pay attention to this. So take a moment and have a vote in the poll below when that's up. I think that's going to be up in a second, so make sure you check it out when it's there. Okay, let's get on with the show, everybody. So let's do some introductions firstly. Let's introduce our guest. Henna, would you like to introduce yourself very quickly? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure thing. My name is Henna Pryor. I am a speaker, executive coach, and facilitator, and I spent 14 years in staffing. So this topic of salary negotiation, self-advocacy is extremely near and dear to my heart. And I'll just add, in case it's not obvious, woman and woman of color. So especially around advocating for marginalized groups, it's a topic that really gets me fired up. So I'm excited to be here.
Great to see you, Henna. And I love the term self-advocacy, by the way. I think that's a term that basically we don't use enough, but it's quite important for this particular show in particular. Okay, let's go to you, Kimberly. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Good morning. My name is Kimberly Jones. I am live from Eastville, California. I'm on the west coast of LA. I wear many hats. I'm a senior director for talent strategy at the University of California, Irvine. I'm also an instructor there. I teach a course, technology applications and talent management, and the global HR certificate program. And then I will say what's most important to me, Chief Executive Officer of Kelton Legend, talent acquisition practice that I launched in 2017. But I will say I have spent all of my HR life really in talent acquisition. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. I will probably be the pot stirrer in this conversation as well because of the word negotiate. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
I think you probably got some competition when it comes to pot stirring, Kim, but,
Okay.
but yeah, it's going to be a good one. Okay, Virgil, let's go to you. For the folks who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself and what it is you do?
Of course, Hung. I'm Virgil. I'm the CEO and co-founders of Figures, right? I'm hosting this webinar series along with Hung. And I've been also an HR professional for 11 to 12 years before I decided to create Figures. And I decided to create Figures to tackle pretty much like the issue with fairness in pay and compensation benchmarking. So Figures is a platform that helps European companies mostly get access to real-time compensation data. And we also help companies, this was a core thing from day one, measure and close the gender pay gap within their own company and then hoping to have an impact on the market as a whole. So of course, a topic close to my heart also, because this was my end of studies thesis, was on the gender pay gap as well. So it's been a topic I've been working on and I've been interested in for years.
That I didn't know, Virgil. So basically, this has been something you've been thinking about way back in academia, and then you went into recruiting, HR, and what have you. Did a great career there, and actually now you've launched a startup that tries to solve the problem. I love that story. That's fantastic. Okay, let's get on with the show, folks. Let's deal with the first big question. Do we think? Firstly, there's some accepted truths, right? Like, we understand that there is a gender pay gap. I don't think there's any like controversy about that. I think if you took all the men and all the women on the planet and you looked at how much people are getting paid, we know there is a gap. I think that's definitely accepted fact right now. What we want to do over the course of the next hour or so is figure out what are the reasons for that. And one of the theories as to why there is a gender pay gap is men and women might talk about salary and compensation differently, both in their inner monologue and also when they go and talk to their bosses and negotiate and all that kind of stuff. Now, is that the case? What do you think, folks? What do you think about, is there a gender difference in terms of how we talk about compensation? Go to you first, Henna, with that.
Sure, 100%. There is a gap in the way we talk about it, and the data sadly supports it. I am US based. I'm in the Philadelphia metro area, so I know we've got people globally, but the most recent study I saw from July said at a minimum, there's a 17% gap between men and women. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but I think the one that seems most pressing to me is that studies have now shown that men are more likely to negotiate their salary than women. Women not only don't do it as often, but don't recognize it as something that is an obvious thing to do always. And there's a little bit of an education gap as far as how should we be approaching these conversations. Men talk about it more. They call it locker room chat. They share salaries with each other. They talk about how they got these raises. And historically, and this is changing, women just haven't been as comfortable having those conversations. And so personally, I'm enjoying the fact that that tide is changing and we are empowering women to have these conversations, but that knowledge of the ability to negotiate and then how to execute on that conversation has historically been lacking a bit.
What are your thoughts on that, Kim? Do you think that we do talk differently, men and women, when it comes to salary? There is like a way in which we kind of think about it and talk about it is different between the genders there.
Yeah, so a couple things. I'll say, speaking from experience, I spent a good amount of my time in the aerospace industry, primarily recruiting engineers across every discipline, and then really the latter part of my career, senior level positions within aerospace. What I found was that for engineers, people who tend to be math minded anyway, women tended to be more detailed about the offer. Men tended to speak more broadly about the types of things that they were looking for in their offer. And so not that they weren't having the discussion, but the way in which they were having the discussion was a very distinct difference based on gender. The other thing, and I'll say this about gender, but other protected classes as well, to what Henna mentioned, this concept of self-advocacy. You still do have certain career paths where women are not represented or historically disadvantaged. There's a certain premise that comes along with, I don't want to seem too confrontational or adversarial. Let me just show some gratitude for at least being given the offer. And so there are times where there's a level of timidness where, well, it's a good company. Let me just accept what they gave me. It's probably better than what I'm making now. And they'll just say yes to whatever was presented to them the first time. And I think that also leads to some shyness around really going back to the table to say, is this the best offer? And again, I'm gonna plant the seed about being the pot stirrer. I'm shying away from the word negotiate very intentionally, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to sprinkle into our discussion today why I try not to use the word negotiate.
Yeah, this is all very interesting. And Virgil, going to you just to finish this circle off. Back in your day as a HR, I think you did Competence, didn't you? Sort of in HR. So did you see anything from a data perspective in terms of how, were women talking about it differently compared to men in terms of salary, and how does that influence the leveling? I mean, I guess, do companies, for instance, automatically try and lowball everybody and, in an attempt to get better value for budget, I guess? I mean, is that one of the things that we need to think about?
So I think there's multiple points in what you mentioned. I'd love to get back to Kimberly on why we shouldn't use the word negotiate, because now I feel like I'm using it waiting for Kimberly's axe to drop on me afterwards. But to your point, though, is, yes, I've seen it 100%, right? And you see it in multiple ways. I wouldn't say like companies try to lowball candidates, but all companies put them into one bag, right? I think, but some for sure use the mystery and the black box that is compensation, and the black box that most people don't know what their self-worth is on the market, to lowball them. So I say it's the company's best interest to offer the lowest amount possible that will be accepted by candidates, right? From a pure business perspective. Now, company culture can change that, but the fact is that from a company business perspective, that is their objective. And then to your point, I think I've seen it clearly 100% in both ways, right? I've seen it through externally recruiting. Of course, women tends to ask for. In fact, we had a study done with a recruiting firm here in France with multiple hundreds of candidates. There was things such as, on average, men were asking for a 20% increase versus women were asking for a 5% increase when changing roles. There was something like 75% of men were not willing to change roles unless they were getting more. Meanwhile, 25% of women were willing, only 25% of women were saying, I won't change a role unless I'm getting an increase. Some were willing to reduce on their salary. And the last one, right? The last number was 90%. It was around 80% of men were submitting a counter offer to the offers they were receiving, when it was on average only 30% of women. So, right, so just that entering the company, so it's an issue. But then maybe we'll talk about it later on. It's not only at hiring time that this is an issue, it's ongoing. And I think there was a point by Annie on the chat. It's an ongoing when during promotion cycles, compensation review, that this history repeats itself. So it's entering the company, this is an issue. Ongoing during the life cycle of an employee within the company, it's also an issue, right? So 100% I've seen it.
I'd love to see the research on that. I appreciate it might be in French, but we can read the numbers. So if you have it, then stick it in the chat. Would love to see it. You know what? It reminds me a little bit about how men and women look at adverts differently, and it's sort of related to this, isn't it? In the sense that we know, for instance, that men tend to apply for jobs where they do not fulfill the requirements. Like if there's a list of requirements, men will just shoot their shot, so to speak, and just go for it. Whereas women need to have like a 90% completed, yes, this is me. Otherwise, they'll self-select themselves out a lot more. And that obviously results in them not giving themselves the opportunity to actually get in. So it sort of seems to be related to that. It feels like a very similar type of mechanic going on in some way. And Henna, I want to go back to you with this idea that maybe it's got to do with, if you like, the cultural knowledge of men being in, if you like, market-based labor, the salaried labor for a longer period of time than women have been. If we look back to history, for instance, the wage economy hasn't necessarily been that sort of long in history. Subsistence, you talk about subsistence farming, you talk about running your own thing. It wasn't necessarily about going and getting a wage from an employer. That may just be like something that's happened over the last 200 years or so with the advent of the industrial economy and so on. And in that period, it was predominantly men that were involved in wage labor, and therefore getting exposure to negotiations, getting exposure, understanding that the boss was not necessarily your friend, right? Understanding that you had to actually fight your corner. Whereas women really only came into the workplace in the same way, maybe in the last 100 years after World War I, World War II. So we have a big shortfall there. What would you say that are things that we could do to help women or sort of equalize this in some way? If it is kind of culturally sort of put down, what would you say we could do to improve that, Henna?
Yeah, I just first want to validate what you've said. I mean, I would argue 200 years, 100 years, I would even say in the last 40 to 50 years. I mean, if we think about the TV shows that were on in the 70s and 80s, it was still women primary caregiver, women were the ones at home. And so it's a very recent shift for women to be as equal in the workplace. And I think it's important to say the pandemic set us way back. There was thousands of women that, left the workforce in droves because we didn't have any other way to manage balancing all of these things. And women were disproportionately the ones who had to take that backseat in their career. And so what was originally an industrial revolution issue became a pandemic issue again. And so what can we do? What can we do to calibrate? I think one of the biggest deficiencies that we have sometimes as women, and something that we need to do some mindset shifting around, is the difference between confidence and competence when it comes to salary. And so you touched on it already with the job application. Men historically are confident enough to say, I got a couple of these things. Yeah, let's apply. Let's apply for that full salary. Versus women, they look at their list of qualifications, they compare it to that job ad and say, I don't know if I'm competent enough. I don't know if I would apply. The same issue comes up when it comes to talking about salary, to advocate for more money. We have those same concerns. Do I have the right to advocate for more money? Did I meet all of these criteria? Versus what we actually should be advocating for when it comes to salary is, what we've done in the past is part of it, but also what is our future potential with this organization? What do we intend to bring? What is the value? So when we can start thinking about salary conversations differently, I think we're more apt to come into that conversation with more confidence and, using your words, Hung, shoot our shot, even if we're not quite ready to do so.
Yeah, so confidence is a really nebulous term, but sometimes it can be explained quite easily, isn't it? It's basically the idea that you've got to just basically give it a shot and not fear failure, essentially. I think confidence might be described as, let's say it's an output, but it's almost like you're not necessarily overly thinking about the negative possibilities of not actually succeeding, but rather than just, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and just practicing, if we want to get real tactical, what does confidence look like in a salary conversation? Not letting that conversation be the first time you say certain things. As Kimberly said, throughout the year, having conversations about your wins, what you bring. It should be an ongoing thing.
Oh, hang on. Let's just dive into this. I think both you and Kimberly have experience in doing coaching, don't you? Like coaching people to do lots of these things. Maybe even you, Virgil, in sort of your role as a leader and as a mentor. Do you encounter people coming to you for this purpose? Like, hey, I need advice on negotiation. Like, I need advice on how to basically make sure my space is actually, my boundaries are actually respected, and I'm pushing, increasing my space to operate. What do you get with your customers and clients coming in? Can you give us some sort of examples of the work you've done there, Henna?
Yeah, absolutely. I get that question constantly. I think, again, I coach a lot of women, and so this is an issue that is top of mind for everyone. And I would say issue or concern number one is, I don't even know how to go about having this conversation. So it's the activation energy that it takes to even ask for this conversation. Usually they wait until salary annual review rather than thinking about making it an ongoing conversation. And then second, it's honestly the sheer emotional panic of, if I put these things on the table, how will it be received? What will I say? And so tactically, some of the advice that I give my own clients is, to come in with a plan. Don't come in let's just wing it and see how it goes. Because again, the confidence is going to not be where it needs to be if this is the first time you're thinking about this or having this conversation. And one of my favorite tips, second, that I always give, and I learned this from Columbia professor Alex Carter, she refers to it as landing the plane. Too often, women especially will come in saying, this is what I'm worth, this is why I'd like more money, and here's all these nitty-gritty details, and we keep talking and talking. So recently I had a client, she's a high-level CPO. She said, I needed to negotiate my salary. I made my case. And then, as much as it killed me, I took your advice, sat on my hands, and I said, what are your concerns? And then let that air hang, right? Land the plane. And that's something that is a negotiation skill that a lot of women are uncomfortable with unless they practice it, but that makes a big difference in the conversation.
Okay, that's amazing. And by the way, if you wanted to check out Henna's coaching sort of school, you can actually get there. So I don't think Visual Mind so much if you shared the link here of your stuff there, Henna. But I tell you what, it's a really interesting. This is an open question, but I think it's definitely true that the more practice you have, the better it is, right? Because if everything that we do for the first time is naturally a little bit trepidatious because we've never done it before. But if you do it once and it's not terrifying, then, the second time should be easier. So maybe it is a question of simply getting the reps in. So probably this should improve over time. I know when I was young as a person going into world of work, I was taking the first offer on the table. Like, yeah, amazing. Yeah. Someone give me a job. And then you start talking to your colleagues and think, hang on, I'm doing this and they're doing that and they're paying that and they're paying this person this and I'm getting that. Then that annoys you, and then that's where you start getting a little bit more sort of steel in your back, so to speak. So reps, basically, practice, negotiation, and there's a skill that you can build to get better at doing this, and that's a learnable skill.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear Kimberly's thoughts on this, but I want to say one last thing. You can be grateful and advocate for yourself at the same time, right? They don't.
Let me preempt it. Go to Kimberly on this, but I'll preempt it with the concern that people might have, the subliminal concern, which is that they're coming across to hostile, or sometimes if you're conflict averse, I'm conflict averse. I fear that I go into it and just end up having a clumsy negotiation and end up actually coming across too hostile or whatnot because I'm technically not good at this. What are your thoughts on that, Kimberly? How would you talk about sort of how do you have conversations where the two interests are not naturally in line, but you're trying to get to a compromise?
Yeah, so a couple things. I appreciate what Henna was talking about as far as the coaching piece. I just last week had a conversation with my niece. She's 26. We're here in the LA market, lots of opportunities. And so she's interviewing and, having these conversations across different industries. And, one company is, at 55 and another company is at 75, like why the disparity? I had to also help her understand the difference between profit and nonprofit. And so when a company's compensation strategy is based on a consumer funded business model, they're going to be much more competitive in the market, especially in a city where the average one-bedroom apartment is $2,600. And so you need to know where you are in the space. The second piece around the conflict adverse, I think some people get so caught up on just the salary that they don't give themselves latitude to really talk about total compensation. And so they're so focused on this one data point, it does seem like you're a dog with a bone, that you're just here. And I always coach my candidates to talk about early in the process, total compensation. And so where the popular thing right now is put the salary in the job posting. Everybody's waiting for their hashtag and all their likes and comments. It's emotional and reactionary, and it's not about knowledge and empowerment to candidates at all. Total compensation is really important. So yes, how much money is in my paycheck, but also how many vacation days do I have? Do I have a separate bank of sick time? Is this really an environment that is merit-based increase? There are, what's your bereavement time look like? All of those have a value. Let me give you an example. When I worked in the aerospace industry, we had 980 Fridays. So every other Friday, the whole plant was closed. That's 26 extra vacation days a year. That has a value if you are single, if you're a single parent, if you're a dual career household. And so spreading out this conversation beyond just salary and really talking about total compensation gives you latitude in that discussion to not seem like I am so singularly focused on salary and we got to get to the number that I'm looking for, that it does create a level of awkwardness after we've all courted each other for the past 4 weeks with the fancy resume and the glitz and glamour of an interview and everybody in the interview panel. Now we get to offer and we're in this sick game of thrones with each other, trying to outwit each other. And then once we get to a number we can all live with, everybody's kind of happy again. And so my greatest piece of advice is really going into this part of the conversation, talking about the total compensation and not just the salary as a single point.
Do you know what? That's actually it's actually become more important now, hasn't it, Kimberly? Because actually total compensation has become more complicated with more flexible working, for instance. And, people are talking about 4-day weeks. They're talking about, hey, how many days can I do this or whatnot? Or potentially, how much time can I work in a different country or what? All these types of increased flexibility in terms of how we deliver our work actually now needs to be a big factor in terms of how we think about it. So probably we as individuals all need to allocate just a little bit more time thinking about all of this than previously that we did. And Henna, I think something you mentioned earlier on, which kind of resonated with me, is that we probably think about the compensation side only on an annual basis or only when we're looking for work or whatever. So it's too episodic. Whereas what we need to do is to constantly have it on our minds, obviously not be obsessed with it. We know people that sometimes are completely, oriented that way, but have it in your mind in a regular way so that, you're kind of thinking about it all the time. I wonder whether there's resources, Virgil, that people can actually tap into. I don't know whether you guys do anything, but, I'm just thinking about pulse reports that give you ideas in terms of where comp is and, negotiation strategy type newsletters or podcasts or whatever. I mean, do those things exist in our world here?
So we've partnered for 2 years in a row with like 15 tech, a company close to our heart that's helped improving the gender equality in tech with a bootcamp named What I Really, Really Want, like a Spice Girls theme bootcamp to help women negotiate. It's a free bootcamp for women to help improve their career and negotiate and so on. And I've been lucky enough to participate into that on a yearly basis to give some tips around that, right? And to help people in that area. But at the same time, and I think Hannah and Kimberly are way more experience and have way more expertise on this coaching thing than I do. And I think there's one point I'd like to make is that we shouldn't forget that this is necessary, right? This is necessary, but it shouldn't prevent us from thinking about the fact that this is companies' responsibility to close this issue more than the individual's responsibility, right? We shouldn't, at times when we focus so much on this negotiating like improvement, we're kind of saying, sometimes you're not saying it, right? I know Hannah and Kimberly are not doing it, but sometimes it can come across as this issue exists because women need to get better at negotiating. No, companies need to get better at ensuring that they're paying people fairly, that they're closing the gender pay gap, and they are structuring their compensation policy so that this doesn't happen, right? So it's a necessary thing because gender pay gap is still a thing, right? But it shouldn't prevent us from thinking about the fact that it's companies' responsibility to pay people fairly first and foremost, 100%.
That's true, but let me just stir the pot here for the first time, Kimberly. So I am going to big stick stir it.
Yes.
That's true, Virgil, but the problem you have, I think the problem we all have is that if we think that we're going to get a just deal simply because of the good graces of businesses and whatnot, I think that's a mistake. That's actually one of the big problems I think we have when we're younger in career, for sure. And maybe this persists more for one gender than the other. It's called just world fallacy. It's like to say, I've done a good job. I expect the good job to be accurately recognized and accurately compensated. Where no, it's like, yes, in a just world, but that's a fallacy. There's no such thing as just world. It's a wrong thing to expect it to be. What we have to do is to say, you know what, it's partly my competence and capability, but it's also partly my capability of negotiating a better deal. And we have to do both. I mean, that's an unfortunate reality of it. That's my perspective. I think it could be dangerous to sit there and wait for companies to do the right thing, because, you know, there may be a percentage of companies that would do the right thing, but there's always a bigger percentage that are going to just, you know, do what they can in order to, whether survive, make more profit, or whatever it might be. So I don't know whether that's the right message to send, even though I totally get where you're coming from, Virgil.
No, but I agree it's both. Huh? Just to clarify, I think both sadly needs to happen, but it's the other way around. We shouldn't. At times, some people are being like, you know, where it's an issue about women not negotiating well enough. You know, it's a negotiating game. So as a company, I'm just gonna be like, well, women negotiate better. That's it, and I'm gonna rest on my back, being like, this is a woman's issue that they don't negotiate better. Both needs to happen. I agree with you. My message is not, wait, company are gonna take good care of you. Yeah, probably not, but both needs to happen in parallel, and we need to push some more ownership on companies to push them to be like more transparent and to show more commitment towards improving fairness and closing the gender pay gap within their company.
Okay, so Sorry, Kim. I'll just say one more thing here. So I've just sort of been Virgil's rebutted my rebuttal, which is fine. But let's go to what companies should do in this case. I think you have a company there. They are aware that, hey, listen, we've got a social responsibility to do the right thing. What steps does that company need to take in order to make sure that there's more equitable pay throughout the piece of their business? I mean, some classic things that we could do. Thoughts on this? Let's throw it out openly. Any thoughts that come immediately to mind that a company that has the will, but they just need to step forward? What's the step?
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. Also, I want to acknowledge Mike Renicella. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. He put a comment in the comment section. Says, as a TA professional, I always coach my manager to present the best offer up front. So I want to tie that to what I want to respond to your question. The responsibility is for companies to show up and be the type of companies that people genuinely want to work for. And so, again, I mentioned that I spent a good deal of my career in the aerospace industry. Government contractors are actually required to demonstrate on a regular basis that they have fair and equitable employment practices. Compensation is one of those. And so working with large federal contractors, two things. One, we knew at any point we would be subject to audit and review to make sure that we were being fair on all of our way, not just engineering, not just manufacturing, all of them. And so that was always a driver in both our policy and our practice. So as a recruiter, I knew that when I was looking at a candidate's resume, regardless to whether or not they were coming in and they would be new to the organization, we looked at the entirety of their experience so that when they came in as a peer, they weren't automatically the lowest paid because they were the newest. We looked at the totality of their experience to really figure out where they fit in their peer group. The second piece about being competitive, the last thing you want to do is play games back and forth with a candidate and a position stay open longer than it needs to because work is not getting done. That work then is not being billed to a client. You're also now underperforming against your competitors. So it served us no purpose to not be competitive in salaries and try to get that best and final as really the first and final offer to get people in because we needed our teams fully staffed so that work was actually getting done. So I agree with Virgil around companies have to show up with an honest effort to be fair first before candidates can really expect that they're going to sit down and have a conversation with someone who's trying to be fair.
Could I distill, got one thing from that, Kim, which I thought was really, really important, which was the idea that maybe it should just be a single offer, like the best offer first, and that's it. So that would maybe eliminate this concept of jockeying around. And, in the jockeying around, let's say there is this gap in terms of the cultural history about who does what, or, who's more familiar with the idea of negotiation. So you eliminate negotiation by basically presenting take or leave. And there's no sort of scenario where this goes up or down. It's simply, here's the best offer we can give, and that's it. Would that be a possible solution that a company can implement? So in other words, prevent your hiring managers from negotiating. Have them agree what the top salary is. That's the salary you deliver to an offerable candidate. That's the one we go with. Thoughts on this? Henna, any ideas on that idea on this?
I think it sounds really nice. I think it's probably difficult in execution. And here's what I think is behind the suggestion that you just made, which is, when Virgil talked about pay transparency, often, or when we talk about this idea of salary transparency, all of us mentally start imagining this grid of here's everyone's salary in the company, here's what people at various levels are earning. But in addition to that, what actually is fueling that is the formulation of what gets people to certain salaries. So really slowing down to peel back the layers, what makes someone earn a specific raise? And what has become very dangerous and what we're trying to undo is, sometimes you'll have somebody in an interview, and Kimberly, I know you've seen this too, where somebody will come in for an interview, they'll get a great offer, and we'll say, well, what is this great offer based on? Well, they had the technical skills, and we also thought they'd be an excellent culture fit. They're getting more money because they'd be a great culture fit. Well, what does that mean? You know, is that leveling the playing field? Culture fit for some companies means we just really like them, so we're going to throw more money at them. But are we clear on what warrants XYZ salary? Are we clear on what earns XYZ raise? And so it's also just transparency about how are we coming up with these numbers. If that is all super clear and transparent, then Hung, absolutely, I think we could go make your best offer. It's rooted in this truth. It's rooted in this fact, but we don't often do that. And so it doesn't always work that way.
So this all comes back to the idea that we need to have like a compensation strategy, right? Like that we need to basically understand why that number is that number. You know, if you have a job that you're saying is worth 80K or whatever, then you need to understand how you magic that up. Like how is the value of the job? You know, what is it going to do? What is the cost of empty seats? You know, if the job is not filled, like how does it cost your business? And then you can construct the compensation from this so that salary isn't just floating around someone's head. I think one thing we do know, that the worst thing you can do is have the salary and the hiring manager, like that they've got some sort of remit to go up or down, however which way it wants, because that's where the team leader or departmental head will be trying to crush down people's salary in order to get more budget, to hire more headcount or whatever. And inevitably, they may even end up like focusing on hiring, you know, the wrong kind of talent just to get under budget or whatnot. So maybe we got to separate, we've got to think about how budgets are allocated for staffing and for salary per department, but is that even feasible to do? Visual, leading to your like a comp and bends type of background, how does it actually work? Do departmental heads, when they say they have the P&L, do they actually have they got the ability to say, right, sort of my salary's in there and I can, you know, pay people less because I want more to spend on a software or something? I don't know.
Now, often it's done at a much higher up level, where they'll be like, you know, we're going to run simulation on headcount because we're going to approximate a budget per headcount. I'm going to say you have 10 roles open. So in fact, it's a very interesting point. Side note to our discussion that most people don't realize, this is one of the reasons why most people can get a higher salary by changing company than by remaining the same company. Most people don't realize that. It's exactly because of this budget planning reason. We're telling managers you have 10 headcounts, and as long as they can make offer within a salary band, no one will go and challenge them, right? So let's say they're about to make an offer on a salary band that's between 80 to 120K. They can go and offer someone 115 without too much hassle in terms of budget. Now, think of someone within their team who's sitting at 85K and would like to be increased to 115K. Now this comes up as a yearly budget of compensation review, which is much, much, much stricter, like this board approval, sometimes external board approval and so on. And so most often managers are like, you know what, you get 85K, I can't give you 115, I can get you to 90, maybe 95. That's it. What happens? This person will be like, well, you know what, I'm going to get 115 elsewhere. One of the reasons the way budget has been constructed in companies is a big reason why it's often better for candidates to jump ship to another company to get an increase.
Yeah. Quick word to the audience here. You do not know this is true, right? I'm assuming most people here have had more than one job. So there's no question that uplift. I think there was some stats actually came out earlier this year to say something. It was in the region of like 15 to 20% more if you moved than it is if you stayed. And that's just taking advantage of market forces. It seems like an insoluble problem, though, doesn't it? I mean, is that something we have to accept somewhat? I mean, what's the theory about potentially solving this?
I think as a whole, I think it's for now it always remains the way because of the way budgets are being constructed. So it's a non-fact, and I don't think it will ever change, at least for a good while, right? But getting back to your question, and the point that's been mentioned by Kimberly and Hannah were amazing. Right? Hannah's point on transparency is something that's big for us at Figures that we push to our clients. Is always people think of transparency as the ultimate transparency. We're going to share everything about our salary. Meanwhile, and we linked an article there, you can be transparent about your company policy first, your processes, then you can be transparent on potentially our salary grid, and then potentially you can be transparent on the entire salaries. But we encourage companies to be more and more transparent because transparency brings accountability as well. And I think we're working on a study because we ask all of our clients, we have more than 700 of them now, how transparent you are internally within your company. And as we're also measuring things such as a internal gender pay gap within the company, We're hoping that in a few weeks, we'll be able to prove that the more transparent is a company, the less inequality, including the gender pay gap there is. I'm 100%, I'm 90% sure this is the case. I'd love to, we are close to have the numbers that hopefully will support that theory, that transparency brings accountability, that brings more fairness to the company.
Okay, well, I think we all need to see that report, right? Because I think that's going to be a very powerful argument. I mean, we know there's arguments against transparency, but also we know there's different types of transparency. And we also know it's more complicated than just saying switch it off. I mean, Kimberly, you worked in a huge company, aerospace, right? I don't know how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are on there and how old that company is. I'm assuming there's going to be lots of salaries going to be all over the place for a company of that scale. So if you just said immediately, hey, everyone's showing their salaries, you're going to have a massive crisis in your hands. It's going to be very, very difficult to kind of implement that in a careful way that isn't destructive to the operations of the business. Go on.
Actually, no. And let me tell you, and again, like I said, this was something I did on a regular basis. So here in the US, so like I said, the companies I worked for, we had a minimum, a 25th percentile, mid 75th percentile, and then like the maximum. The core of engineering, electrical, computer, mechanical. And so we knew pretty much that early career engineers were coming in somewhere around 25th percentile and mid, but our more senior design engineers, because they had longer career longevity, they tended to be well beyond mid into the 75th. You might have a few people kind of in that red circle area from 75 to 100. But some of the new engineers would come in and were coached inappropriately by their college, their career services office, and want to come in and demand, why is this person's salary different than mine? And they weren't prepared to have their feelings hurt. And so when you then lay it all out to say, oh, here's how we calculate salary. Here's everybody in this peer group in your particular business unit, at our particular site across the country in the areas where we have the same cost of living. And so when you come in as a learner, or as someone who's proficient or someone who's an expert, we assessed based on your experience where you fall in your peer group. This is what you articulated to us in your interview. Or if you've been there 1 to 3 years, here's how you've performed as an engineer. You've been okay, but there have been others that are greater. This is why this person's salary is $3,000, $5,000, or $8,000 different than yours. So same or different doesn't mean we're not being equitable. It means that you are performing in a merit-based organization. So put everybody's salary up on the whiteboard in the cafeteria. If I, as an employer, have been committed to being fair, I can validate every single difference, so I don't ever have to feel like I have to defend the differences. Now, I also recognize I've been in environments that are very different. Everybody doesn't enjoy kind of what I've experienced, but it doesn't mean that companies can't aspire to be that. So I never shy away from salary conversations when people want to compare paychecks, because I'm also going to ask you to validate who you are and what you're contributing to this organization, to say why you believe you're not being paid fairly.
I think that it's a very interesting topic, and actually McGann has shared a link to our second webinar, because we're going to do a series of this, and it is on salary transparency. So take a minute to check out the chat stream, and there's a link there. Make sure you click on that link and register for it now, because we're going to run that. I don't know when it is. It's about 4 weeks time, but we're going to be taking a deep dive into salary transparency and how to do it. So the mechanics of that are going to be more clear. Definitely something to pay attention to. It is a little bit more complicated than the switch on, switch off type of vibe that you sometimes get, particularly if you've got a long company that's had a lot of tenured employees over time. And there's also privacy issues as well. We'll dive into that in sort of in next week. Make sure you sign up for that, folks. Okay, let's talk about give people some advice. We're going to go to the questions in the poll in a second, but let's turn our attentions to one thing that we could give. So we're going to split two ways: advice for individuals negotiating salary, advice for employers trying to do a more equitable and fairer way to pay people in the right way. So one, kind of thing each, please, if you could. We're going to change the order a little bit. So Virgil, let's go to you first. Giving advice to, let's say, a friend of yours. They've come to you for, hey, I'm negotiating. How would you advise this person to get the best deal for them?
It's a good one. It's a good one. The first thing I'd say, is when asked about your salary expectations, first of all, when people ask you about your current salary, you have no reasons to answer. And in fact, it's outlawed in many states in the US. It's being outlawed in many countries now, which is one of the easy way to tackle this issue. You don't have to share your current salary. It can only be used against you, to be fair. And when asked about salary expectation, I'd say, don't hesitate to ask the company, well, why don't you tell me what you think this role is worth, what you plan on paying it, and why you plan on paying this role that? Like reverse, put accountability back on employees, on companies to explain how they, say, show me how you think you can offer me a fair compensation, right? I think that's, and often people can be scary, but this is an actionable advice that works.
Yeah, let me stop you right there. That's classic negotiation. Whoever says the number first loses, right? So get them to say the number.
Yeah, anchoring effect. Exactly.
Yeah. Get them to say the number. So, that may even be a preemptive thing you want to do. So rather than waiting for the offer to come, as Hannah, you mentioned right at the beginning, let's go right in there, talk about budget, talk about what the value of the job is, talk about all of those things, like how much it's going to mean on the bottom line for that business. Get them to come out with the numbers, and then it gives you a better chance to negotiate. Great tip. Okay, let's go to you, Kim. Give us one tip. You got, let's say, the niece, the nephew coming to you and say, hey, one thing you can say to that person to really help them get the best deal.
Yeah, so there's two things. One, I have intentionally replaced the word communicate in place of the word negotiate. And again, because so many people out on social media with a platform and an audience have stirred up a lot of emotion, but not necessarily provided knowledge. The negotiate has become so adversarial, it's not even useful. So if you communicate, you don't have to negotiate. And so 2 points in the communicate. The job posting should list the total compensation. It just should. And if it doesn't, when the recruiter contacts you, and you get to this stage in the conversation about offer, they say, what are your salary expectations? I always coach my candidates to say, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Can you talk to me about what the total compensation package looks like? It broadens the discussion and it helps you understand other things that actually also have monetary value. The second piece is after your interview, if the recruiter has not scheduled time, you reach out to the recruiter to say, can we debrief? Because recruiters will always debrief with the hiring team or the hiring manager. They rarely, if ever, debrief intentionally with the candidate. And so as a candidate, you want to make sure you reaffirm, here's what the job posting said. Here was my interview with you. Here's the interview with the team. Are we all on the same page? If we're moving to offer, do we all have the same expectations of each other about what it'll take to get us to yes? If you learn in the interview that there's been 70% turnover and this team is under-resourced, that's different than what was in the job posting. You are certainly well within your rights to say, does this impact then what I should expect for salary? Because this role is very different than what I saw there. So 2 things. Make sure in the pre-screen that you're talking about total compensation. And then after the interview, before you get to offer, because you don't want to pit yourself in this discussion at the actual point of offer, after the interview, get time with that recruiter and debrief from the interview so that you're prepared to say yes or no, and nobody's misunderstanding what it will take to get us both to yes.
Yeah, I love that, Kimberly. And I love the idea that if you communicate, you don't negotiate. I think that's so correct. And if you can even look at negotiation as a failure of communication in many respects, because if the communication was transparent enough at the beginning, if the quality was enough, then there would be no scenario where there's an expectation gap. Between the two parties that are there. So absolutely, the takeaways from me here are, again, let's get the conversation in early in terms of where we're at, recheck and restate after every event. So it's not a case where, you can have the conversation really at the beginning of process, tick a few boxes there, and then wait to the very end, and then suddenly there's a big reveal and it's a shocking number and it's a big surprise to you. No, you got to check as a candidate, take the responsibility because it's your interest to do that. Okay, Henna, go to you real quick. One bit of advice you give to candidates on the candidate side, negotiate better deal.
Yeah, and I know we want to get to questions, so I'll keep it quick. So Virgil and Kimberly, I think, gave some really good tactics for, if you're taking a new job externally or internally. I want to speak to quickly the person who maybe isn't taking a new job, is just trying to get more money. And so one of my favorite exercises is take your original job description and have it in front of you more than once a year, right? Have it on your computer saved somewhere. And over the course of weeks, months, over the course of the year, look every now and then at that job description that you originally hired to and take stock of the other things that you are doing, the value that you have been adding. So when it does come time for a salary negotiation, you literally probably have a new job description written, what you were hired to do and all the things you've actually done. And it's a great basis for a discussion, and it doesn't have to be a last minute thing. You've been cataloging throughout the year.
I love that. And in fact, there's probably some technology that can help you do that, isn't there? Like a textual comparison thing that you could just imagine how powerful that would be if you had the old job description and you just pumped out all of the additional stuff you're doing and highlighted text. Boom. You're going to get your bloody 30% increase. Okay, let's go to... we're going to have to go to questions real quick because I think we're running out of time and we're at 10 minutes here. So let's have a look at this. We're going to go in vote order, folks. Still not too late to stick in a few questions, by the way, if you want to. But let's go with Julie Lachon-Offray. Is that how you pronounce it? I do forgive me for my terrible French. Let's start the answer here. Julie's saying, what about salary grid? Do you think there's still a gap possible between men and women if there is a salary grid? Do we understand what salary grid is? It's basically a structured. Here's the level, here's the number based on where you're at, right? So, what are your thoughts on this? Does this eliminate the gender pay gap if we had some sort of a thing like this? Vishil's shaking his head real definitively. Why not, man? Surely this does the job, doesn't it?
So let's say it's a good solution. Any solution that makes your compensation more objective and less reliant, once again, on negotiation, the better. So it's one way. But as I said, salary grid is not often one number, it's often a range. And a range is rooms for negotiations. So we get back to the old topic we've been discussing.
That's it. So not the solution because there is a range, unless you're
going
to
be better than nothing. It's better than nothing. If you have nothing, it's bad.
Unless you are super granular, like ridiculously granular, it's not going to be the case, right? Okay, folks, a lot of questions, so we might not be able to go around to everyone. So I'll just point to somebody and say, can you deal with this one? Okay. Gagi is saying, okay, have you worked in a transparent model which helps genders negotiate fair? Kimberly, you want to give this a quick shot? Have you worked in a transparent model in some way?
Yeah, so I currently work for University of California, Irvine. We are state employees. You can state employees' salaries are published on the internet. So you can Google University of California employees and see everybody's salary. And so it does come up sometimes where candidates who are considering or current employees look and see Becky is making blah, blah, blah. Like she takes 17 smoke breaks. Why is she getting paid more than everybody else? And so it forces conversations most of the time in a very awkward adversarial way. But with that, like I said, we understand that we have a commitment to be fair. We also have to be prepared when those questions come to validate, why somebody is where they are, why that person is where they are. So yeah, University of California has 250,000 employees, I think. Everybody's salary is published. You can go Google it right now and see how much everybody makes.
Kimberly, would you mind sharing a link where that's available? I think that'd be really interesting.
Yes. I'll find it and I'll send it to you. And you can send it out. But
stick it in the chat right here. I think people would love to see it. Because I think the example is still quite unusual. So to see it like out there, I think it'd be really interesting. And by the way, certain countries actually are completely transparent. I think Norway is one of the few countries that actually does have, it's all on a spreadsheet. It's like online, you can check it out. So it would be interesting to know what was going on there. Okay, let's keep going. So Annie Lee is saying, how does the gender pay gap correlate to other metrics like offer acceptance rate, average tenure, etc.? Is there any correlation between I guess it's a big term. I mean, do we see do men and women accept jobs at a different rate? I mean, does anyone have the data on that? I don't have the data,
but I would say that it is an emotional kind of sticking it to someone with their self-worth if they feel or have found out that someone who is their equivalent is making more for the same job. So I think the biggest concern is, should transparency not be there and they find that out later, you're going to have issues. That person does not feel valued at the company. That person feels unfairly compensated. So, it depends what's come up in the past or in the initial conversation.
There has to be a way to figure that out, isn't there? And I do wonder whether there's going to be some products that have, they're doing offers, right? There's certain products that actually do offer management. If they collect things like gender data and demographic data, that would be really, really interesting to know. Like, what is the offer rate? And is there any, that would be like fabulous information to have access to. Okay, let's keep going with these questions. Annie, you've asked like zillions of questions. I'm going to give you one more. This is the new employees often get paid more than current employees due to offer comp increasing. We've talked about this before. How do TA and HR collaborate better so that doesn't happen? Because it can be unfair, right? I'm sitting here, I'm loyal, I'm doing a great job, and then boom, in comes a new hire that the company needs to hire, but it's like the 20% uplift. Not a better person, not a better worker. Why are they being paid more? How do we solve this problem? Virgil, give it a shot.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to solve this problem, right? So one way to tackle it is, and I think it was mentioned by someone, I can't remember who mentioned it in the chat, is that often new hires compensation is more tied to current market rates, and potentially old people, like people who have more tenure, their compensation is tied to all market rates, which were lower at the time. So meaning you need to ensure you're being competitive towards the market. So you need to get fresh real-time data, compensation data. But two, once you get this data, what often most companies do, they adjust the ranges, and this impacts future hires only. What not enough companies do is like, you know what, we've realized we've been out of touch with the market a little bit. We've increased our ranges that will apply for new hires, but we will proactively increase employees on our current roles so that they're closer to market rates, right? And in fact, for a company to proactively increase someone that has never asked for an increase, and I've done that the past twice. I've done that with like 20, 30, 40 employees, coming up and being like, he didn't ask for anything, but here is like an 8% increase because we feel you're being underpaid. It has an incredible impact in terms of the level of trust you have between an employee and employer, because you're like, you know what, I'm giving you something you haven't asked for because I think this is a fair thing to do.
Right, I love that, because if you give someone like the preemptive raise, that feels great, right? And it's actually worth more than a couple of percentage points. Just looking at my own sort of back in the day when people thought it was a good idea to pay me a salary. I remember back in those days, it was like if you asked for it and you got something, it was like you had to fight for that. But if someone just dropped it on you, it was like, wow, I'm getting recognized. The recognition is the emotional value is right up there. So I guess a more regular way to understand and update your compensation to your staff and closer to real time, because as you say, Virgil, it's a once a year type of thing, maybe even longer in some places where they don't review comp, right? And they're often waiting for the negotiation to happen before they do review comp. So, the old school companies would simply have that. Here's your salary, and then they'll respond if you basically cause EFOS, quote unquote, which obviously we talked right at the beginning, Hannah, that may sort of be a big component to the gender pay gap in the end. Yeah. Okay, we are mega running short on time, folks, so that we might not be able to get to every question here. We have multiple questions asking the same thing about the no negotiation rule. Have we implemented this? Have you any experience of trying it? What are your thoughts on it as a tool to try and equalize the gender pay gap? Open to everyone on this.
I'll share a thought that I think I understand the intention behind it. I think it is dangerous in that it assumes that we are all motivated by the same things. I personally would take slightly less money for more flexibility, for more time with my family. So I think when we do the no negotiation, it sets a sort of blanket standard for what do people want. All I know for sure is we don't all want the same things. We don't all value the same things. So I think there's good in the intention. I think in execution, it misses the mark, especially for women who end up having slightly different situations, especially in this pandemic era. My take.
Any other thoughts on this?
I think to your point, Hung, and it ties back to the point you were making earlier on, like the suggestion that making the best offer, no negotiation, could be a good way. I think this could be a good thing to aim for. I think it's a bit more tricky on an operational nature, as Hannah was saying. But if you combine that with the commitment from a company that you're not going to ask candidates about their salary expectation, or even worse, no reason to ask for their current salary, I think this is the number one action that one company can take. I'm not asking candidates expectation. I'm going to give you what I think you're worth. I think it can work, because if you do no negotiation, but you ask candidates expectation, and you end up once again lowballing women who don't negotiate as much, I think it can backfire. But if you don't combine that with not asking about candidate expectation, just giving your best offer, could work.
Yeah, very interesting. How about you, Kimberly? Thoughts on this? I think we might have already covered it a little bit, but if you don't mind sort of talking about the no negotiation rule.
Yeah, so if everybody was the exact same, that would work, but that's not where we are. You do have people who the quality of their experience really demands that they be paid higher into the range, and so I think it's probably a little too myopic to be realistic, to be able to say, here you go, and that's it. Again, there has to be discussion, and there has to be some objective assessment of the range and what the person brings to the table to really try to put out there something that really is the right and most competitive, not just offer, but again, the total compensation package that goes along with it.
And all of this, by the way, feeds into the great work, I think. I mean, I need to say this, Virgil, not as a result of any contractual obligation, but I really love the fact that there is compensation tech-like figures going on, because that gives us, basically it helps all parties understand what the market rate is. And I think that will do a great. How much of this is about like the opacity as to what the worth is, right? Because we're walking around all of this without this information. We're trying to pick it up from our friends or our buddies working in the other department or whatever. We don't actually know what the value is, so we're all guessing, and that includes hiring managers, includes everyone else. Even the comp and bends folks are guessing. So what we need to have is a way in which we can access. Here is the market rate. Here is the sector average for a role at this level. Boom, and that's the thing that we should all be shooting for. I think it will remove a lot of the pressure out of the entire concept of negotiating salary and rate. Okay, listen, folks, let's go to the polls. I want to draw your attention to the polls. Please submit your polls. We've got a few more to go. The first one, let's reveal. Can I reveal the gender sort of one? I think we can. I think everyone can see that. Very interesting. The first question we asked was, okay, what is the composition of the audience? We've got, the question is, what gender do you identify as? Female 81%, male 19%, other 0%. So we can see this is actually a much more prominent conversation in the minds of women. I think I can read this as both a good and bad thing, in the sense that, we have women that are interested in this topic, but it's also potentially concerning. And again, that, men either don't feel welcome in the space, or they don't feel it's a problem. So education, big part of what we have to do going forward. Okay, let's do the transparency one. How have we got this? Oh, it's ticking away.
I think you get a majority. Well, it's like 37% of people are in companies with no transparency at all, so more than a third. Like nearly the same thing. A third had transparency on compensation policy, 20% on salary grid, and less than 10% have full transparency, like Kimberly at the University of California has full transparency on all salaries.
Yeah, which basically means if you want to get there, you want to definitely register for the next webinar coming up, because there'll be some practical sort of things that we're going to show right there. Okay, the final poll, folks. Rate the quality of this webinar. 1, if it was absolutely terrible, we're never going to see these people ever again. 5, you know what? Please continue the conversation. It's been so great. Give us your vote, folks. We want to know whether this is worthwhile and worthwhile doing. Okay, I think that's about it. We were out of time already, so I want to just thank everyone for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and got value from it. I certainly have. I've learned a huge amount. Thank you so much to our guests for spending their time. So Hannah Pryor, thank you for your great insights and your great wisdom. Kimberly Jones, great to see you. I don't think we've ever had a conversation, so I'm actually really pleased to have met you properly today. Thank you so much for your contributions also, especially getting up at the ridiculous hour. And Virgil, great to have a chat with you on this. You know, I just underline that it's fantastic to see that you've carried this passion all the way through to the point where there may actually be a solution to it. So massive credit to you and your team for getting to this point. Okay, folks, that's about it. We're back, I think, next month, where we're going to do a sort of salary transparency. Make sure you register for that, and we'll see you there next time.
Bye-bye, everyone.
So, is it me that stops the show? Or
Yeah, I think you should have a. If you want to keep talking,
I'm happy to keep talking. I don't mind.
Just keep hanging on.
That's cool.
Miguel is telling me that Lifestorm is stuck, that she's trying to end the event, but it's stuck. So we might be stuck into this event for days and days. So we might have to keep going. This is now becoming an event marathon or something like that.
This sounds like a Black Mirror episode, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly.
A Zoom call you can't exit.
Yes. I have a leave button. Would it offend anyone if I tried to press it?
No, I think we have to. Most people will. I think pretty much everyone. Maybe there's a freeze. Maybe like
I think it's
like
frozen. Yeah, there's no way people are still stuck on here listening to this, right? So yeah, I think we can leave. But I don't know how to do that. Yeah, everyone gonna do it?
Button.
All right.
It's working.
That's cool. All right.
I think it's 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now? Okay, great.
Virgil, are you in France? Is that where you are?
Yes, Paris, exactly.
I will be in Paris in the airport. I'm on my way to Egypt Friday. I have a 1 hour and 40-minute layover, so I'll just wave at you as I go over the sky.
Please do, Kimberly. Have a safe trip.
All right, thank you so much. You guys have a good day.
Bye-bye.
See you, Kimberly.
Bye-bye.
Hang, see you in 2 weeks. So webinar,
Yep,
I think is in 2 weeks.
Take it easy, man. We'll see you then.
Yes. Bye-bye, Hang.
Yes.